Welcome to episode 133 of Sport SA Daily Diary. Today we're chatting to one of South Africa's leading aquatic divers, Julia Vincent. Good morning, Julia. Well, afternoon for us, morning for you. How are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
Good, thank you. We've just been chatting before the interview, and you've got a bit of a twang in your accent.
Unfortunately, yes. It's hard when I've been living here for 6 years now, so when you hear the accent so often, it's just so hard to keep my own. But I do try to. Certain words I'll never change, but.
And you're obviously in South Carolina in the US, which I would imagine the accents are a bit stronger than your sort of New York's or LA or that sort of thing.
Yes, definitely. Sort of New York has its own sort of twang, but it's definitely stronger in terms of the Southern accent. We definitely, I hear a lot of the South, so yeah.
And Julia, you're a diver, and we'll get into that. Not a diving on the football field, but diving into the water
Right.
diver. But you grew up in Johannesburg.
I did.
Kingsmead, and tell us a bit about Julia of young.
Very, very adventurous. Love the thrill of life. And that's sort of what led me into diving. I really enjoy sort of being afraid. You know, I enjoyed just the thrill of learning something new. So, yep, I started at Craig Hall. Started at Montrose Primary, went to Craig Hall, and then Kingsmead was my school right before I went to Tux after that, and loved every part of it. But it's definitely been a very different journey to what I've experienced here in the US.
Yeah, I'm sure, absolutely. And Julia, you were pretty active at school. First team hockey, you played netball, athletics. Athletics is so much so that your mom actually wanted you to pursue a career in athletics rather than the diving.
Yes, that's true. Actually, I guess she saw sort of potential in that sport, and so did my coach at the time. And so it was definitely a tough decision to choose between the two. But I think diving just stole my heart. So.
And we'll get to that and why. But it's quite incredible. I mean, I've chatted to quite a few sportsmen now. How multi-talented top athletes are. I mean, from being able to play hockey for a first team to be able to run 800 meters in pretty phenomenal times, and you don't end up in either of those sports, but you end up in diving.
Yeah, it is I guess a strange thing, but I don't know. I've always just I love the competition, so I guess that's what sort of drove me. I mean, I love the sports obviously, but there's so much that comes with that in terms of competition, and you know, there's just so much, like I said, thrill to learning something new and then trying to become good at it. So, yeah.
And you started diving quite late, at the age of 14. I would imagine there's quite a few of the top divers from around the world that are already competing on the international stage at that age. What was it about diving that sort of stole your heart, as you say?
Sort of basically what I touched on before, just that thrill of learning. I think I wasn't really exposed to it before that, so I didn't really know what diving was until I got to high school, and that's when I saw the boards at Kingsmead, and I immediately was like, this is what I want to do. And at first I didn't have any intentions of, going to where I've been, but I just wanted to see what I could do in the sport. So I started very small with just some school diving just to see how that went. But yeah, I think it was just the fact that I hadn't been exposed to it until Kingsmead luckily had boards, and yeah, from then it just got a lot more serious. So.
And I mean, it went serious pretty quickly. You obviously ended up at the University of South Carolina. How did that come about? And I mean, that must have been quite a big move for a Joburg girl to sort of uproot her whole life and move everything to a place miles and miles away.
It was a big move. I think I'm lucky in the sense that my mom's pretty she sort of did a very similar move. She's from New Zealand, and she just sort of uprooted her life and moved to South Africa, which is why I was born there. So I think it sort of runs in my genes a little bit, just to, you know, stick with that adventurous path. But I actually had no intentions of coming to the United States until about half a year into my Tux. I started sports science at Tux, and I thought I was just going to finish out my degree there. I had no intentions of coming over until a coach from the United States came over to one of our big competitions back home and said, I mean, why not look at it? Why not see what you can see, what, what are your options over here? And so that really spurred my interest. And so I mean, it's a very long process. I must admit, like the whole recruiting thing, it's stressful and it's a long process, but I'm so glad that I went through all of that, because it's been such a journey over here.
And do you manage to get home a lot? I presume your family is all still here.
Yeah. So, well, my brother's actually working in New Zealand, but my mom and my actual like primary residence is still back home. So, unless I'm coming home for a nationals, which is every April, and every now and then I've been home for 2 Christmases just because I've had a meet around that time. Other than that, I don't really go home because the flights are just too expensive, and it's hard to take that much time off if I'm not going to compete. So.
And you mentioned your mom being from New Zealand. Was it ever an option for you to dive for New Zealand as opposed to dive for South Africa?
So it is an option, and it could still be an option. And that would have to, something big and drastic would have to change my heart in that sense, just because I'm patriotic for the country I was born in. So as much as I love New Zealand, I really do. It's one of those things I'd have to be sort of pushed out of South Africa to change my competition nationality. So I wouldn't mind. I love the country, but just I'm a
That's
South African at heart. So
that's great to hear, because we've chatted to a couple of athletes who've been offered opportunities to represent other countries, and they've all obviously said no because of their patriotism towards South Africa, and just the strangeness of possibly getting up on a podium and hearing a national anthem of a foreign country. Not that New Zealand
right.
is specifically foreign to you.
Yeah. And I think there's something so special about hearing the South African national anthem if you're up on that podium. I mean, I feel like a lot of us can relate in the sense that when you hear someone like, let's say, Chad Leclos, or someone that, has really outperformed for South Africa, and you hear that national anthem go off, I mean, I think that we get emotional just watching someone. So, I feel like it would be just amazing to have your own national anthem going off while you're standing up there.
And Julia, you first represented South Africa at the World Junior Diving Champs in 2010, and again in 2012. What was it like, firstly, representing your country for the first time, and secondly, the level of competition must have been quite a step up from what you've been used to?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that is probably what spurred my interest in the sport the most. I think I wasn't ever on the fence, I'd say, because I was very interested from the start, but that's sort of what led me to be more disciplined. And I saw what I wanted to do from that point on, and I was going to make sure that happened no matter what. So that was a really, really influential meet in my career, I would say. Probably one of the most influential, just because of how much everything changed after that. And then, yeah, I mean, it was just to see that kind of competition was, I mean, so just such a great experience, just because you're not exposed to that until obviously you're there, and then you're like, wow, I have a long way to go, but this is amazing, and I can't wait to try to get there. It's one of those things you're so overwhelmed at first, and then you really reflect and you're like, I just have to put in a lot of work to get there. So.
And sort of growing up at that younger sort of age, did you have anyone that you were looking up to? Obviously, there was Jenna Dreyer, who was representing South Africa at the 2008 Olympics. Was
Mhm.
she somebody who sort of inspired you, or was there someone else from another country?
So because I started the sport so late, I didn't know a lot about many divers. It wasn't something I was like, obsessed with a certain diver. But it's funny you mentioned Jen Andrea. We're actually pretty good friends now, and it's been really awesome to be able to get to know her outside of diving. And when I was leading into the Rio Olympics, she was probably one of the most influential people. But she definitely, I don't think I would have been able to lead up to the Olympics and feel as okay as I did just without her, because she was able to relate, and it was just different to anyone else that was talking to me and encouraging me. She just had that experience that I was going through. So Jen Dre definitely. And then there are definitely a few divers around the world that I've always looked up to, but like I said, I started so late, so I didn't have this like a diver up on my wall on a poster. It's just it was I was just too old by then.
And Julia, you've been all over the world, but obviously from a training perspective, it must be quite hectic in terms of the hours that you have to put in. You mentioned just before we started that you're off to training after our chat. What sort of training hours do you do, and how many times a day are you training?
So obviously with COVID, everything's looked very, very different. On a normal day, I train so I go 8:30 to 10:30 in the morning, and then I have a little break, and then I start back up at 1 o'clock, and we usually go to around 3:30 or 4. And so the first practice will be dry land, trampoline, flips, anything that's sort of conditioning, drill work. Not really, we're doing our dives, but not in the water. And then later on in the day, we get in the water, and that's that practice from 1 to 3. And then after that, I either do some form of cardio, depending on the day, or I have a weightlifting session. So it ends up being a good at least 5 hours, when you 5 or 6 hours when you calculate it all together. But and it can be tiring. But right now, I'm just doing something a little different. I leave for practice at 8, and I sort of don't get back until 2, so 2 in the afternoon. So it's just been different because of the pools that we've had to find to train in. So.
And obviously, there's a fair bit of core strength that you need to do. We see you girls and the guys diving, and your body strength must be incredibly strong, especially your core.
The core it's hard to actually know how important the core is until you're trying to perform a dive. That if you're an outsider in diving and you're trying to do the dive, and you're like, oh my goodness, like I need to be able to hold my body in a certain position for a certain amount of time. And so but we sort of hammer core a lot. It's basically very emphasized all the way through the practice. So I usually, on top of my weights, I usually do an extra set of core just to sort of keep up with what I need to be strong enough to do some of the stuff that we have to do. So.
And Julia, you mentioned sort of 5 hours of training. Obviously, you're still studying as well. You're a young lady. You obviously have to have a social life as well. Mm-hmm. How do you balance it all? It must be pretty hectic. And do you have very understanding friends that know that you're an Olympic athlete and you need to dedicate a lot of your time to training?
I definitely do. I think thank God for my friends, because a lot of the times, it's hard when you're 25. You want to be able to, spend time with your friends and sort of live a normal 25-year-old life. But like you just said, there isn't much time for that. And so I typically, my friends have gotten very used to me sort of turning down any kind of plans throughout the week. I'm a little more lenient during the weekend. I don't have a lot of training during the weekend, so I can be. And I want to be able to see my friends because they've always been so supportive. But sort of if any kind of plan is too late in the day on a weekday, I just tell them I can't do it. So, and they're very understanding. And it's just one of those things I guess I've learned to balance with all the school that I've been doing up until this point. And maybe like you're saying before, the whole doing multiple sports at a young age maybe helped me balance all of that, because I've been busy from a young age. So I've sort of learned that I have to prioritize and plan ahead. So.
And when you do plan for your diving, there's always a specific thing that you remember. you wear two black wristbands on your arms. Why is that?
So I've unfortunately never had the best wrists in the world. So I just hitting the water at at a speed can be very taxing on your wrist, and some people are not, not at all affected. And they say do a lot of handstand work. So a lot of the people on the 10 meter, it's a lot higher, so they're more affected. They have to tape up or wear wrist guard. For some reason, not many springboard divers struggle with this, but for some reason my wrists just do not handle the impact. So I've had injuries in the past, and now this is the only way that I've been able to maintain and not train through injuries, because they've protected me. So
Oh, very interesting. And Julia, you dive off 1 meter, 3 meter, and you also do synchronized 3 meter. Tell us a bit about the three different disciplines.
So 3 meter and synchronized 3 meter those are the two that are Olympic events. The 1 meter, I've always had so much fun with it. It's a great board, but it's not as extravagant to the observer's eye. So it's not a big sport at big international meets, or a big board at big international meets, because it's low to the water. So people don't find it as interesting. So I really enjoy it. It's cool. You can try to get lots of flips in a short space, in a small amount of space. But 3 meter is really the one that I focus on the most, and that's where most of my competitors, that's where they focus too. And then synchronized, it's basically the same as the 3 meter. You're just doing it to try to look completely the same as the other person next to you. So yeah, they're different, but I would say 3 meter and 3 meter synchro are a lot more similar than the 1 meter.
And when you competing internationally in the synchronized, do you always have the same partner, or do you just switch it up?
So since Rio, so that would be 4 years ago now, I haven't competed synchro. Leading up to Rio, we came to a decision that it wouldn't be wise to try to get that spot when we didn't have. So you have to have a certain degree of difficulty, and we didn't have that degree of difficulty. And so it was, we decided it was wise to just focus on the individual event. And so I haven't done it since then, but it's a lot of fun, and it's definitely a different experience.
And Julia, there's a couple of you girls overseas in the US. We've got Nicole Gillis, Michaela Bouter, and Jamie Gundry. Are you guys all mates, or is there sort of competitive edge to your friendship, or sort of what how do you react or engage with each other?
I think as the years have gone by, I think we've all gotten a lot closer, and we've sort of become this little crew that we can know that we can fall back on. And we've been traveling together for so long now, just the four of us, that it's definitely someone that you can count on. But like you just said, it's hard when it's hard not to have that competitive edge. Everyone wants to be the number one in the country, so you have to. You're a competitor on the board, but we've learned very well to leave the board, leave diving behind once we're off, and you're good friends. And even when we're on the board, it's still healthy. I would say healthy competition, because I'm not wishing bad upon any of them. But Nicole's actually she's still living in the United States. She's not training right now, and then Michaela's moved to London to train there. So. And then Jamie's also still in the States, she's in England as well. So we've all sort of spread out a little bit, but yeah, definitely I think we've definitely grown closer over the past few years.
And you talk about your results and number one in South Africa. You've dominated in South Africa for quite a while. You've also had some amazing results overseas. You're an All-American diver. You've been to the World Champs 2013, 15, 17, the Diving World Cup in 2014 and 2016. I want to come to the Olympics after this, but out of all those sort of earlier moments in your career, has there been one specific moment that's been the highlight? discounting?
I would definitely say it was the World Championships after the Olympics. Um, that was my highest finishing my highest finishing meet internationally, um, outside of Commonwealth Games, but at a World Championship that was my highest finishing meet, and on the 3 meter, and it was more of like a revenge kind of meet. I just I had this fire inside of me. I wasn't happy with my Olympic performance, and so I knew going there that I needed to do something that would prove myself a little bit more. So I think that's why that meant so much to me, going to that meet and sort of showing that I did have what it takes to sort of to make a final. So that was a big one for sure.
And you mentioned you were a little bit unhappy with your Olympic results, and we'll get to that now. It must have been an incredible moment in your career to get to Rio, experience the games, opening ceremony, walk around and see all these amazingly talented international athletes. Was it a bit of a sort of double-edged sword in terms of the emotion of being there, which was incredible, and then not being too happy with your result?
Absolutely. I think there was a lot, looking back, there was so much going on emotionally and mentally at the Olympics. And I felt like it was just the most incredible experience. And I actually got to experience it with my mom as well. She was there. So just that alone was something that I will, cherish forever. But then, like you said, on the other side, I wish I could have done better. I always, there's always like, you're a competitor at heart. So you want to be able to do the best that you can do for your country. And I didn't feel like I did that. And so it was difficult just knowing that I could have done better. And I didn't. That can be hard, but like I said, sort of moving forward, I tried to channel that energy into just performing at the next meet. So that's why that meet afterwards made such an impact in my life, because I felt like I was able to do that. But being at the Olympics there's nothing like an opening ceremony. I mean, that was probably one of the best parts of the whole thing. But at the same time, just on competition day, I was, I've definitely been happy on competition days. I'll say that much.
Well, I suppose you can't be at the top of your game all the time. Julia, it sounds like your mom's been quite an influence in your career, and a bit of a double-edged sword. Comment on that, but also it seems sort of in South Africa and amongst swimming South Africa that the swimming discipline sort of gets a lot more focused than the diving discipline itself. Do you have any sort of thoughts and feelings on that in terms of why you think diving doesn't get the recognition it deserves?
So I think it's difficult because swimming is such a big sport, and especially it's a pretty big sport back home. If we're comparing it to sports like diving, water polo, it's one of the biggest sports. So it's difficult when South African diving has sort of a total of 30 people in the whole country. Maybe a few more, but you get my point. Like, it's very difficult when it's just for small as a sport, and so and then on top of that, if we aren't performing, the swimming side will always have at least one performer that is on top of their game, so it is difficult just because that you're constantly trying to prove yourself to make sure that South Africa sort of, you want to put South Africa on the map when it comes to diving, and so you're trying to prove yourself and make sure that the country sees that you're putting in the work, and we're trying to put show everyone else what South Africa is made of. So that part is difficult, but it's not something that I haven't grown up with. So we're very used to it now. Even in the sport, or even in the United States. I mean, diving's much bigger here, but it's still I would say it's still like considered on the back burner, considered to swimming. It's just, I think it's a very common theme throughout the world. So.
And the influence of your mom on your career?
Definitely huge. At first, it's funny, my mom didn't really want to going into like starting club and everything. She wasn't a huge fan of it, so in the beginning it was like, do you have to be doing this? Like, why did you choose this sport? And then, as things progress and time went by, she's become one of my like biggest supporters, and she's that supporter that's super embarrassing, and I just have to just tell myself she's my mom, so she's allowed to be embarrassing. The things that she does for me, I mean, she's just amazing. And the biggest thing that she's done for me is let me, her only daughter, live 8,000 miles away to pursue my dream. And that's something it gives me goosebumps thinking about, because I don't know that a lot of parents would be okay with letting their children do that, just because it's so far away, and she gets to see me at most twice a year. So she's been just such a huge support in my sport.
Yeah, I mean, it's always great to have that one person there that does help you through it. Julia, just in closing, sort of plans for the future. Obviously, the Olympics is who knows where. Hopefully 2021 is going to happen. Is that a goal of yours? And after that, what's the plan for Julia?
So my plan going forward has always been to go to 2024. So when the whole this like whole thing happened and the Olympics was postponed by a year, it didn't change much. If anything, it gave me a little extra time to fix some things that I had been having issues fixing. And so I feel like I've been blessed with a year to sort of get things going again. So I definitely want to keep going. I'm going to be training for 2021, hopefully competing there, and then 2024 I hope to continue on. Things might change after 2021, but at this point in time, I'm hoping to continue on as long as my body can handle it. So.
And do we foresee Julia coming back to South Africa in the long-term plan, or are you overseas for good?
Eventually, I would say eventually. I think while I'm young, I'm going to try to stay outside of South Africa, and even like obviously while I'm training, it's wise for me to stay here, but even when I start to work, I think I'm going to see what I can do in terms of earning a different kind of currency, just because I have the option. I have a New Zealand passport. Earning dollars would be a whole lot better than earning rands just while I'm young, and I need to sort of build that, that repertoire. So I think I'm hoping that I can stay outside of South Africa, work, and then move back home eventually. But we'll see. I think I sort of live life on a little bit day by day, so we'll see what happens.
And again, do you see diving as an important role in your life long term, in terms of possibly helping youngsters in South Africa growing the sport?
So originally, I would say no, but as I've gotten sort of deeper into the sport, and as I've started to see the inside of diving in so many organizations, and sort of just you as an athlete, you experience so much, and so I think knowing a lot of what I know now, I have this desire to possibly go back and see what I can do to help. And having this experience in the United States, not that United States is perfect by any means, but I think that there's definitely something to learn from them. And so it'd be cool to go back and see how I can help, and see if I can sort of develop some of the younger divers in South Africa. And I don't really have any intentions of being a coach ever. I do a little bit of just like volunteering coaching now, but it would be cool to go back and see how I can just sort of change the dynamics sort of South African diving. So.
Well, I'm sure Diving South Africa and Swimming South Africa would be absolutely honoured to have you back. Julia, it's been brilliant chatting to you on Sport SA Daily Diary. Thank you very much for your time. Good luck with your final preparation and the Olympics. Let's hope to see you flying the flag.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate you having me on here. Bye.
Look out for tomorrow's episode of Sport SA Daily Diary, where we chat to a volunteer from the 2010 FIFA World Cup whose story is a little different.